I want to ask you about the weapons coming through Irish airspace. They shot up in October of last year. They went from an average of about 100 exemptions for the carriage of munitions of war and civil aircraft per month to about 200, 190 in October, and have stayed at a consistently high level since October. What happened in October, October 7th, and then the genocidal onslaught that we've seen by Israel on Gaza. So, at the very least, it would seem very strange, very coincidental for the increase in the carriage of munitions on civil aircraft through this country going up dramatically at the time that the war on Gaza starts. It would seem, on the face of it, that there's likely a connection between the two. But we don't know, do we, Taoiseach? Because you refuse to inspect aircraft. You give permissions and then you don't inspect. Will you inspect the aircraft at Shannon Airport and elsewhere?
Just in relation to the humanitarian situation in Gaza and funding for UNRWA, we call on all states to restore their funding for UNRWA pending the outcome of the investigation about possible collaboration. The EU has done that and has restored funding, and we want other countries to do the same. In relation to my talks in Washington, yes, we talked about the US putting more pressure on Israel to allow more trucks through, and that's being done. And also the US has proposals to build a temporary jetty or port to allow more aid to get through. But I think we all agree that it needs to go through by land. There's only so much you can do by port and by air. We have had some conversations with Jordan about how we might be able to help in a practical way, but the main way we can help is through money and through political pressure, and that's what we're doing. In relation to the Sanchez-Varadkar letter to President von der Leyen, that has been followed up on. It was discussed twice at Foreign Affairs Council. The discussion was led by Vice President Borrell. He asked ministers for a political steer on it and as to how to proceed, and there was not consensus. Some countries took the view that a review or action should be initiated in order to put pressure on Israel. Other countries took the view that that should not be done. Absent consensus to move things forward, things haven't moved forward, but I will be raising it again tomorrow in my discussions with Vice President Borrell and President von der Leyen. In relation to Deputy Barry, happy to clarify that when I was referring to your approach, I was referring to calls of boycotts of our allies, like the US and President Biden. I don't think that would be a productive effect. I think the slot would just have been filled by somebody else, quite frankly. I don't think it would have resonated around the world. But I do think that the protests are important and they are effective, and the protests that have happened around the world have been helpful, quite frankly, on this issue to those of us who are trying to get much the same outcome as you are, albeit a two-state solution rather than a one-state one, which almost nobody on the ground actually wants. In relation to my discussions with President Biden, I discussed US military aid for Ukraine and for Israel. President Biden made it very clear that Israel has its own military strength and that the US would continue military aid for Israel so it can defend itself against the many countries that don't recognise it and would wish to attack it. Just in relation to former President Robinson, she didn't contact me in advance of the meeting. Where President Biden, certainly not directly. There's no letter, no call, no message, but she may have done indirectly, but that would have been very late in the day. In relation to recognition...
Did you ask him not to?
Please.
Did you ask him to stop sending the weapons?
Please. We're out of time.
Well,
anyway.
we discussed the matter, like...
Did you ask him not to send the weapons or not?
Well, I believe I did, but
okay.
Like if that's what you're asking me, but
yes.
it's kind of a moot point when somebody says to you that the opposite, you know.